Harvey Ashford didn't expect to meet a woman in leather boots and designer sunglasses at the edge of a muddy riverbank, but there she was, standing like she'd taken a wrong turn on her way to a fashion shoot. He adjusted the strap of his old fishing bag and glanced down at his 7-year-old daughter tugging his hand. "Daddy, she's standing where we always sit," Elodie whispered. Harvey crouched beside her. "That's okay, sweetheart. We'll ask her nicely to move." Before he could, the woman turned around. Her eyes were hidden behind dark lenses, but her smile was warm. "I didn't mean to intrude. I didn't know this was someone's spot." Harvey cleared his throat. "It's not officially ours. Just the best fishing spot in the county." "I figured," she said, pulling off her sunglasses. Her eyes were a sharp green, curious and amused. "I've been trying to find a decent place to fish since I moved here. I'm Holland Kessler." "Elodie," the little girl said proudly, then pointed. "And that's my dad. He knows all the secret places." Harvey gave a short nod. "Harvey, you fish a lot." "Trying to," Holland said. "I'm honestly not very good at it." Harvey raised a brow. "That rod's brand new. You just buy it," she laughed. "Yep, yesterday. I watched a YouTube video and thought, how hard can it be?" Elodie giggled, and Harvey found himself smiling too. There was something disarming about Holland, even though she looked like she belonged in a city penthouse rather than a muddy riverside. "Come on," he said, gesturing down the path. "The spot we use is actually a few minutes that way. It's not easy to find unless you've been coming here for years." Holland followed without hesitation, stumbling a little over roots, but laughing every time she caught her balance. Elodie skipped ahead, proudly announcing every log, rock, and frog along the way. After 10 minutes, they reached a quiet bend in the riverbank, shaded by willow trees and hidden from the road. Holland whistled. "Okay, I get it. This is amazing." Harvey handed her a worm and a hook. "Let's see if you can catch anything." "I'm not touching that," she said, backing away like the worm was radioactive. He chuckled. "Then you're not fishing." Elodie rolled her eyes. "She's like Aunt May. She doesn't like bugs either." "I like bugs," Holland said. "I just don't like slimy spaghetti bugs." Harvey threaded the hook for her, then handed the rod back. "Cast gently. Aim for the shade under the willow." She tried. The line flipped into the air and landed behind her. Harvey bit back a laugh. "Okay, we've got work to do." They stayed there for hours, Harvey patiently teaching her how to hold, cast, and reel, while Elodie perched on a log nearby and offered commentary. By the time the sun started dipping, Holland had caught 2 fish barely. Elodie was dozing off against her dad's arm when Holland stood and brushed off her jeans. "This was actually kind of perfect, thank you," Harvey nodded. "Anytime." "I mean it," she said, looking at him. "I've had a really long few weeks." This was the first time I felt like I could breathe. He didn't ask what she meant. He could see something in her eyes, sadness she hadn't voiced, but he wasn't the kind to pry. "Well, if you want to breathe again," he said. "We come here every Saturday." She smiled. "Then I guess I'll see you next Saturday." When she left, Harvey watched her walk away, her boots covered in mud, her perfectly styled hair falling loose in the breeze. She didn't look like someone who'd ever need help finding peace, but she had, and he'd given it to her. What he didn't know was that back in her sleek black SUV parked near the main road, Holland Kessler had a missed call from her investment advisor, a full inbox of client emails, and a luxury penthouse waiting for her in the next town over. Because Holland wasn't just some city girl looking for peace. She was a millionaire, and she was already falling for the man who had no idea who she really was. The following Saturday, Holland returned, this time in sneakers and jeans that didn't scream dry clean only. She arrived just as Harvey and Elodie were climbing out of his old pickup. He lifted a brow when he saw her outfit. "You traded the boots," he said. "I learned my lesson," she replied, holding up a small cooler. "I brought sandwiches. I figured I should contribute something that doesn't flop around on a hook." Elodie clapped. "Do they have peanut butter?" "They have everything," Holland said, crouching to open the lid. "Turkey with sharp cheddar, peanut butter with honey, and one with just jelly in case you're feeling wild." Harvey leaned against the truck door, arms crossed. "You always go this hard for riverside lunches." "No," she said, straightening. "Just when I want to impress a 7-year-old. Elodie beamed and grabbed the jelly sandwich. Harvey didn't say anything, but something shifted in his eyes, curiosity laced with surprise. They hiked to the river bend again, Holland keeping pace without tripping once. She didn't ask for help over the narrow log bridge, and she didn't flinch when a mosquito landed on her arm. Instead, she flicked it off without breaking stride. Harvey stood beside her at the water's edge while a Lodi chased minnows nearby. This time, Holland cast the line without sending it backward. "You've been practicing," he said. "I might have joined a fishing forum." He turned to her, amused. "You joined a forum? I like to be prepared." "You also like to win," he observed. She looked over, eyes glinting. "You make that sound like a bad thing." "It's not," he said. "Just rare." They stood in silence for a moment, the river gurgling quietly around them. Then Holland glanced at him. "You said you've been coming here for years. Always just you and a Lodi?" His jaw tensed slightly, but he nodded. "Since she was 4. What about her mom? She passed away a while back." Holland's fingers tightened slightly around the fishing rod. "I'm sorry." He nodded once, not looking at her. They didn't speak for a few minutes after that, but the quiet wasn't uncomfortable. It settled around them gently, like an old blanket. Elodie broke it. "Dad, my boot's stuck again." Harvey jogged over as she pointed at where her foot had sunk into soft mud near the water's edge. He bent to help, but Holland was already there, kneeling in the grass. "I've got you," she said, gently loosening the boot. Lodi wiggled her foot free and threw her arms around Holland without thinking. "You're way cooler than Aunt May." Holland's breath caught, and she hugged the girl back. "That might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me." Harvey watched them for a moment, then turned back toward the cooler. "You brought cookies too?" "Shortbread," she said, setting Elodie's boot aside. "Homemade, kind of. I bought the dough." "I cut the shapes," she said, brushing a twig from her knee. "It counts. You're full of surprises." She sat beside him on the log, pulling a cookie from the tin. "That's the idea." Later, when the fish weren't biting and Elodie had fallen asleep on a folded jacket, Holland turned to him. "Do you ever wish you were somewhere else?" she asked. He looked out at the river. "Sometimes, but then I remember why I stayed." She studied his profile. "Because of Elodie, partly," he said, "but also because this place keeps me grounded. I know every street, every crack in the road. I know the guy who fixes my truck and the woman who brings us eggs every Sunday. That kind of thing matters." She nodded slowly, her gaze drifting toward the tree canopy above. "I used to think the opposite. That the more places you saw, the more complete you became. And now, I don't know," she said. "Lately I've been wondering if I've been chasing the wrong kind of peace." Harvey didn't ask what she meant. He just watched her for a moment, then handed her the last cookie. She took it with a half smile. "You're not going to fight me for it. You brought the food. Seems fair you get the final bite." She broke the cookie in two and handed him half. "Then we share it." That night, after driving back to her penthouse 30 minutes out of town, Holland stood barefoot in her marble kitchen, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows. City lights blinked beneath her, cold and glittering. She opened her laptop and ignored the stack of messages waiting. Instead, she pulled up a browser and typed in best local bait shops within 10 miles. She wasn't just falling, she was planning to stay. The third Saturday came with a drizzle, the kind that clung to your sleeves without really soaking through. Holland showed up anyway, hood pulled over her head, a thermos tucked beneath her arm. Harvey was already there, crouched near the water's edge with Elodie perched on a flat rock beside him, her tiny raincoat so yellow she looked like a walking daffodil. "You're late," Elodie called out, grinning as Holland approached. "I brought hot chocolate, so I'm forgiven," Holland said, lifting the thermos like a peace offering. Harvey stood up, rain beating off his jacket. "You didn't have to come in this weather." "I wanted to," she replied, handing him a cup. "Besides, I figured the fish wouldn't mind." They didn't fish long. The rain picked up, and Elodie's nose turned pink from the chill. Harvey lifted her into his arms without hesitation, and Holland watched the way the little girl rested her head against his shoulder, completely at ease. Back at the truck, they climbed into the cab, damp and laughing. Holland sat in the backseat with Elodie, who clutched the thermos like it held treasure. Harvey glanced at Holland through the rearview mirror. "You ever been to Millie's Diner?" She shook her head. "Is that the place with the flickering sign?" "That's the one," he said. "They've got the best buttermilk pancakes in the county." Elodie perked up. Can we go? Harvey hesitated for a beat before nodding. Let's make it our backup plan for rainy Saturdays. Millie's was small, the kind of place with vinyl booths and a jukebox that only played songs older than anyone in the room. The waitress knew Harvey and Elodie by name and gave Holland a curious once-over before setting down 3 mismatched mugs. Harvey ordered for all of them without asking, and Holland didn't mind. It was oddly comforting to be looked after for once. So, she said, stirring her coffee, what do you do when you're not teaching people how to hook worms? Harvey leaned back in the booth. I do restoration work. Wood mostly, old furniture, barns, that sort of thing. That sounds satisfying. It is, he said. You take something people think is too far gone and show them it still has worth. She nodded, her expression unreadable. That's a rare way to look at things. He studied her for a moment. What about you? Holland's fingers tightened around the mug. I'm in consulting, he raised a brow. That's vague. It's meant to be, she said with a small shrug. Corporate stuff. I help companies restructure, streamline, make more money. Elodie wrinkled her nose. That sounds boring, Holland laughed. It is, that's why I fish on Saturdays now. Harvey didn't press. He'd noticed her dodge, but he let it go. She was here. That told him enough. After breakfast, they lingered in the parking lot. Elodie danced in puddles while Harvey and Holland stood beneath the diner's awning. I've been thinking, she said, watching Elodie leap over a particularly large puddle. I might take a break from work, just for a little while. He glanced at her. You don't seem like the type to slow down. Neither did I, she said, but lately I've been wondering what all the running's been for. He didn't respond, but the silence between them was different now, heavier, more charged. Just then, Elodie slipped and landed in a shallow puddle. She let out a startled yelp and both adults rushed over. I'm okay, she said, sitting up and laughing, water dripping from her ponytail. Holland scooped her up without hesitation, cradling her against her chest and not caring that her designer coat was getting soaked. Harvey watched her, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. They drove back in silence, the radio playing softly. Elodie fell asleep with her head on Holland's lap, and Holland gently brushed a damp curl from the girl's forehead. At the house, Harvey carried Elodie inside. Holland followed, unsure if she was being invited or just tolerated, but when Harvey came back out, he didn't send her away. Instead, he nodded toward the porch swing. Coffee, she sat beside him, pulling the blanket from the swing's armrest over her knees. I wasn't expecting this, he said quietly. She looked at him. What? You, all of this? He gestured vaguely toward the house, the porch, the sleeping child inside. You don't exactly blend in. I'm not trying to blend in, she said. I just want something real. He turned to face her, brow furrowed. And what does that look like to you? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. She handed it to him. He opened it slowly. It was a sketch rough, done in pencil, a little girl on a log, fishing rod in hand, a man beside her, and a woman sitting nearby with her legs folded beneath her. You drew this. I started it the night I met you, she said. I never draw people, but that day I don't know. I didn't want to forget it. Harvey looked down at the paper for a long time before folding it carefully and handing it back. You don't have to give it back, she said. I want you to keep it, he said. Because when this ends, and it will, I want you to remember that you were part of something good. Her chest tightened. Why would it end? Because women like you don't stay in places like this, he said. No matter how many sandwiches you bring or drawings you make. She opened her mouth to argue, but he stood and walked back inside, the screen door closing softly behind him. Holland sat there alone, the blanket still wrapped around her legs, the sound of rain tapping against the roof. He didn't know the truth yet, but she was going to tell him. Even if it risked everything, on a warm Thursday afternoon, Holland stood outside the old workshop Harvey rented behind the hardware store, clutching a box wrapped in brown paper. She'd never been there before, but she'd memorized the directions Elodie gave her last weekend, complete with the note. Look for the red bicycle by the door, that means he's inside. The bike was there, leaning against the siding like always, and the scent of sawdust drifted through the cracked window. She hesitated only a moment before pushing the door open. Inside, the air was thick with the sound of gentle sanding and the hum of an old radio. Harvey stood at a bench, sleeves rolled, head bent over a cabinet door, moving with the smooth rhythm of someone who found clarity in repetition. He didn't look up when she stepped in. "I figured you'd show up eventually," he said, voice steady. "I brought something," she said, holding out the box. He set down the sandpaper and turned, arms dusted with fine grains of wood. "What is it?" "Proof," she said. "And an apology." He took it but didn't open it. "You lied." "I didn't lie," she said. "I just didn't tell you everything. There's a difference." He raised an eyebrow. "Is there?" She crossed the floor slowly. "I wasn't hiding it to be cruel. I liked how you looked at me. Like I wasn't defined by what I earned or owned. I didn't want to ruin that." "You think money ruins things?" "I think it changes how people treat you," she said. "And I didn't want to be treated like a transaction." He set the box on the workbench but didn't open it. "And what do you want to be treated like?" "Someone who matters," she said. "Not because I can write a check, because I show up, because I care." He looked at her for a long time, eyes unreadable, then he gestured toward the box. "What's in it?" She reached over and opened the lid herself. Inside were two things: a photo of a downtown building with a sold sign across it, and a folded document with Harvey's name typed across the top. He frowned. "What is this?" "I bought the old Ridley storefront," she said. "The one next to the bakery that's been empty for years. I'm converting it into a gallery workshop combo. You'd run the back half, full freedom, no rent, no nonsense." He stared at the photo. "Why would you do that?" "Because you restore things, Harvey. I destroy them, or I used to. I want to build something now. And I want to do it with people who know how to make things last." He didn't say anything, so she added, "And because I never learned how to gut a trout, and I think I'd be better at it if I had a reason to be around longer." He exhaled, low and careful. "You think you can just buy your way into this?" "No," she said. "I think I already earned my way into it. This is just how I make sure I stay." He picked up the contract, scanned it, then set it down again. "You know I don't need some shiny space to do what I do." "I know. But I need a reason to stay in this town, and I'd like that reason to include you." His jaw shifted, but something in his eyes softened. "You really bought the building, full price, no negotiation. Even let the agent talk me into keeping that terrible awning." He let out a short laugh, and it broke the tension like glass underfoot. She stepped closer. "You're allowed to be mad, but don't push me away just because I have money. That's not who I am anymore." He looked down at her, his hand brushing against hers on the edge of the workbench. "I'm not mad," he said. "I'm just trying to understand how someone who builds skyscrapers ends up chasing bluegill in the rain with a little girl and her dad." "I didn't chase the fish," she said softly. "I chased the feeling of being seen, of being still. Of being part of something that doesn't need to be polished to be meaningful." He stepped forward, closing what little space remained between them. "You matter, Holland. You didn't have to prove anything to me." "I still wanted to," she whispered. He leaned in and kissed her, slow and certain. When they parted, she rested her forehead against his chest, breathing in the scent of cedar and something uniquely him. "Does this mean I can come fishing on Sunday too?" "You're already on the list," he said. 2 weeks later, the town buzzed with the surprise grand opening of Ash and Kessler Restoration and Gallery, the name stenciled in gold across the newly polished glass. Inside, one half of the building gleamed with finished cabinets, antique desks, and work tables. The other half displayed local paintings, sketches, and artisan crafts, many of which Holland had curated herself from artists she'd quietly funded for years. Elodie stood proudly beneath a framed drawing of her very first catch, her name written in the corner in blocky letters. "That's mine," she informed every visitor who passed. "My new mom helped me frame it." No one missed the word mom. Harvey, in a clean white shirt with sleeves rolled to his elbows, wrapped an arm around Holland's waist as they stood near the front window. The payout wasn't in applause or sales, but in the way people stayed, lingered, smiled. Later that night, after the lights dimmed and the last guest left, Harvey took her hand and led her up the narrow back stairs to the tiny apartment above the shop. It wasn't her penthouse, but it had hardwood floors, a claw-foot tub, and a view of the courthouse clock. He opened the door to reveal something else: candles everywhere, and Elodie curled up on a blanket fort with a book in her lap. "This isn't just for tonight," he said. It's for always. Holland didn't cry, but her voice caught as she leaned into him. I didn't think I could have this. You didn't have to think, he said. You just had to stay. She kissed him again, and this time there was no hesitation, no storm waiting to crash, just warmth, just home. And outside, the river kept running the same secret bend, the same willow trees waiting for Sunday. A month later, Holland stood in the middle of the town square wearing a white linen dress, her bare shoulders kissed by the late spring sun. The sky had opened up in a perfect blue, and a canopy of wildflowers framed the small bandstand where the ceremony was taking place. She glanced over at Elodie, who sat in the front row with a bundle of daisies in her lap, her feet swinging above the grass. Harvey stood at the altar, one hand resting loosely by his side, the other curling nervously around the edge of the wooden railing. He wore a slate-gray suit that Holland had never seen before, and he looked like he'd been pulled out of a magazine and dropped into a storybook. But his eyes were locked on her, steady and unwavering, and in that moment, it didn't matter that their love didn't follow the traditional script. What mattered was that it was real. Entirely, ferociously real. The officiant cleared his throat, but Harvey spoke before he could begin. I didn't plan for any of this, he said. Not you, not this life, not standing here in front of everyone I've ever known with my heart in someone else's hands, but I've never been more certain of anything. Holland blinked, her throat tight. I used to think love was something you grew out of, something that faded when life got too hard, he continued. But then you showed up. You walked straight into our world like you'd always belonged, and I realized love doesn't fade. It deepens. She stepped closer, unable to wait, and the officiant chuckled softly before nodding. Go on then, he said. Say your vows. She took Harvey's hands, her fingers trembling. I've lived 1,000 lives in boardrooms, hotel lobbies, and red-eye flights. I've worn masks so long I forgot what my face looked like underneath them, and then I met you, and Elodie, and suddenly I didn't need masks. I didn't need armor, I just needed you. Elodie let out a quiet sniffle and someone passed her a tissue. Holland smiled through the tightness in her chest. I don't want a life of scheduled meetings and gold-plated everything, she said. I want this. I want burnt pancakes on Sunday mornings. I want the creak in the porch swing. I want to be the person Elodie calls when she needs help with a school project. I want to be yours. The vows ended, and the kiss that followed wasn't dramatic or sweeping. It was slow, reverent, like both of them knew what they were walking into and were ready for it. The entire town gathered for the reception at the gallery workshop. Tables spilled out onto the street, covered in mismatched linens and vases of fresh daisies. A local band played from the flatbed of a truck, and Elodie danced between her parents with a ribbon tied in her hair. Holland's assistant had flown in for the wedding and now stood in the corner, quietly stunned by the sight of her former boss barefoot and laughing as she helped a group of kids decorate cupcakes. Harvey's brother, who'd driven in from 3 counties away, leaned over with a beer in his hand and said, She really gave up the penthouse for this. Harvey looked across the street at Holland, who was holding Elodie's hand and pointing to the mural they'd painted together on the side of the building. She didn't give anything up, he replied. She just found something better. As the sun dipped low, Holland slipped away from the crowd and climbed the narrow staircase to the apartment above the gallery. Harvey followed a moment later, finding her standing at the window, watching the town glow beneath strings of lights. You disappeared, he said, wrapping his arms around her waist. I wanted to look, she said, to really see it, this town, this life. He kissed her shoulder, resting his chin there. Still think you'll get bored? Never, she said. Because I'm not chasing anymore, I'm here. Below them, Elodie's laughter echoed up from the street. Holland turned and cupped Harvey's face in her hands. Do you know what the best part of all this is? She asked. He shook his head. That there's nothing else I'm waiting for, I've already got it. Years passed with the same quiet rhythm. Holland expanded the gallery to include art classes for kids, while Harvey's custom restoration business gained a waiting list longer than the bakery's Saturday morning line. Elodie grew into her own sharp, kind, and wildly imaginative, and when she painted a piece that won a statewide contest, she credited her 2 parents who taught me that real life is better than anything you can make up. On their 5th anniversary, Harvey surprised Holland with a new porch swing he'd carved himself. Etched into the wood were the words, "No masks, no armor, just us." That evening they sat beneath the stars, Elodie asleep inside, the warm breeze rustling through the trees. Holland leaned her head against Harvey's shoulder. "Do you ever miss the quiet life you had before I came crashing in?" He laughed softly. Not for a second. And when she turned to look at him, eyes shining in the moonlight, he kissed her again the same way he had that first time. Slow, certain, and with nothing held back, because this was it. Their forever wasn't built on grand illusions or fragile fantasies. It was built on porch swings, fishing lines, and the kind of love that doesn't need to be chased, it just needs to be chosen, again and again. And they did, every single day.